Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm blessed to live another day into 1st of Rabiul Akhir 1442, 17th of November 2020. Thank you, YouTube. Thank you, all subscribers, all viewers, and all the keen comments by far for my video. And before we go on, I would like to remind all of us, especially myself and Muslim colleagues all over the world, that if you are in a mosque attending Friday prayers and listening to the Khatib's khutbah, or you are in any sessions of religious teachings, kuliah, etc., please do not watch this video. Thank you very much. Now, in this video, I'm attempting again to link concerns of safety, health, and environment. And in this particular video, we will take a look at one of my favorite industry, and also one of my favorite unit process involved in the industry, which is a boiler furnace. Okay, so without further ado, yeah, let us go into the next following slides. I have a picture here taken when I was doing audit for this industry, which is palm oil mill, and they are using a kind of boiler, and I think this one is the later version of from the old boiler. This is more of the Fraser incline boiler tubes, and they are using fuel. We call it solid fuel. They are using fruit fibers, palm oil, empty fruit bunches fibers as fuel, and occasionally they would add up some kernel to enhance the combustion to generate the fire. And this boiler is a furnace comprised of a furnace below the equipment, and this furnace is burning what is called a, they call it kettle. It's just like our kettle at home, which contains water, and that water is being heated up, generating steam. For us at home, we finish when the steam is produced, but for palm oil mill, that steam which is produced is being superheated under high pressure, so that it's enough force to drive turbines. So this industry is self-generating in terms of power, in terms of energy. They burn waste, which is empty fruit bunch fiber. They, of course, they have got to make it smaller pieces, dry it up, and that will be the fuel for this furnace, which is renewable resource, and generate their own power without any fossil fuel. And that power is used to power the entire factory complex, and even offices. Okay, and even as far as I know, in some instances, even there are what I call estate homes. So okay, that is this particular industry. Now, our concern, well, as far as my attempt to link safety, health, and environment, is one of the environmental aspects of concern is palm oil fruit fibers. It is being laid in the open yard, and before it is probably treated to dryness, dried up, because if this boiler is burning wet fibers, normally it will lead to an unsightly emission of darker smoke. Okay, so that is palm oil fruit fibers as it enters. And how does it affect safety? These fibers, by virtue of the nature, it is moist, All right, and when it is moist and it is fed into this particular furnace, it do cause some rigorous reaction in the furnace. Is like well, boilers, a boiler man. If you're operating these boilers and you want to add up to my comment, I'm not the expert in this furnace operation or safety health. You know better than I do. Please add up in the comment. It would enhance the fire. It is rigorous, and in some instances, you could hear some small popping explosion sound. So the potential hazard is for this particular furnace is moist feet, and it is not good if it's too wet. Okay, and even the furnace door, right? There are some instances when there is a fire here due to some variance in quality of the feed of the what they call fiber feed. We call it fiber feed that is being fed via worm conveyor into this. It's a feeding system of fiber into the furnace for the boiler, and that has caused some irregularity, and the fire would come out from the door if it's not well managed. And of course, when you are working here, once in a while, once in a while, quite oftenly, you got to do raking to remove some of the solid remnants from this combustion. There are some residue which is not burnt or ashes. We call it boiler ashes, okay? And we've got to remove the ashes, so that we need to have a more combustible material inside more space and volume. So these ashes would what you call it, occupy those space, and the ashes has got to go out to ensure also to maintain optimum combustion, to maintain optimum fire temperature. And they look at the steam pressure produced. That will be their barometer to look, the gauge to look into whether they need to have the feeding or they need to maintain the feeding. That would be proportional. I'm not good at explaining that. And another hazard of having working nearby this is, of course, the furnace radiant heat. It can be convected around. It is warm, and of course, with high temperature, with combustion, and this particular furnace has got fire grating at the bottom of the furnace around here. Some fire grating, and some has been using some kind of suspended burning to enhance combustion and also to reduce black smoke emission, which is good. And that has an effect to health, this operation, and people get some form of heat stress, and and some gets injured because of the flying splinter and all this, and the smoke, the dust. You get some form of respiratory ailment for that, and that has got to be attended in the nearest medical center, perhaps in-house clinic, and they got to be addressed, and all the medical waste being generated, and that would be causing an environmental impact elsewhere, especially the medical incineration plant. And the fruit fiber is also having, being organic, these fruit fibers being organic and in a moist condition, it would attract some form of oleophilic organisms, and it could be causing skin irritation over prolonged handling of this, and people can get sick because of that. It's moist and nutritious. These fibers are organic, and of course that would attract microbes uh, to a certain level, to a certain population, and might be, some of the microbes might be pathogens and may cause health effect. And when our friend is working with uh, not in a good physical and health condition, it might lead to some form of deviation from the SOP of the operation of this furnace, and he might not be able to probably read the steam pressure correctly, or not able to feed to do raking in the correct manner, etc. There's a lot of technical procedures that is rather stringent, and that and needs prompt attention by boilermen. But they know better than I do. I just learned from them. Now, in environmental management, um, our concern is definitely environmental aspect. And let me recap the definition of environmental management system as per ISO 14001 version 2015 is managing environmental aspects in the form of fulfilling compliance obligation and considering, identifying, and attending to associated risk and opportunities derived from these particular aspects vis-a-vis the operation of those activities. So that is an environmental management system. Okay, let's take a look at one environmental aspect. We are seeing fire. So let's take fire. Fire is an environmental aspect. Why? Because fire interacts with the environment, and in this case the fire is an output environmental aspect. How does it interact with the environment? Then we got to look at its downstream life cycle, because fire is an output. Remember, when it is an output aspect, we have to look at the downstream of its life cycle to determine its associated probable environmental impact. So for output aspects, the downstream of its life cycle is what happened to the fire. First of all, it heat up everything. You get hot. So there's a lot of heat convection around the area. I'm not sure if you want to say global warming. Carry on. Most consultants that I met talking about global warming when they present papers, even though it comes from a single incinerated chimney. Go ahead, because the concern is for global warming, the multiple number of exhausts and chimneys. Yeah, okay, you can say that, but I would rather address it regionally or locally. I would call it heat convection. Okay, and on top of that, the fire. What happened to the fire? It boils water in the boiler. That's what happened to the fire. Not just generating heat. That heat is needed to boil the boiler, and the boiler boils steam. And the steam is boiled further at high temperature of this fire is needed. Superheating, they call it. I may be wrong, correct me. And produces what? The steam turns turbine, and turbine generate, look, electrical energy. So the impact to the environment is renewable energy. Nice. This is a self-sustaining industry. It produces its own energy from its own waste. We would call it waste, not for them. What? Empty fruit bunch, fibers, and this is environmental sustainable industry. Okay, and for that reason, they don't depend on fossil fuel. When they don't depend on fossil fuel, look, it is an environmental impact rarely found, not many, okay, which is contributing to resource conservation, and that is the fire. Okay, let's take a look at another environmental aspect, and let's go into this. This is real hardcore stuff that is calling for scheduled maintenance, because this boiler is using boiler tubes, and there's boiler tubes that is connected to superheaters. Please get the boiler man to explain that to you. I'm no good at it. I just understood, and I try to talk about what I understood. And if I go wrong, please correct me. All right. I'm not a person who knows everything under the sky. I'm still learning. Now the boiler tube is made of metal. Uh, Ironically, this is something that I've been pondering because I've been auditing some coal-fired power plants that also burn solid fuel, coal, subbituminous, which which produce heat, fire and heat, and boil steam. And the steam from the coal-fired power plant, I saw it was recycled. Uh, and the water that they use, what they did is they softened the water, demineralized the water, demin water, and that has saved them the life of their boiler tubes. But for palm oil mill, as far as I know, please correct me if I'm wrong again, their source of boiler water is from the ground or the river, and there's a lot of mud, a lot of, yeah, it is brownish. They What they did is, I saw them treating those water using conventional coagulant and flocculant, as you could see in industrial effluent treatment system, to flock inorganics. But this flocculant is namely for heavy metals, and then it has gone through a sand bit filter. But when we tested the water, it still do contain minerals, calcium, manganese. It's not removed entirely, so it's not so efficient in removing minerals for the raw boiler water feed, which comes from perhaps the groundwater or the river. These boiler tubes are oftenly scaled up with minerals, and they got to change the boiler tubes quite often because scales will build up. And for that, the boiler tube is no longer efficient. And the boiler tube, when they purchase new boiler tube, it comes in as input in this particular process. And and these boiler tubes are made of metal. So what sort of environmental impact is related to boiler tubes, since they are made of metal? Upstream of the life cycle perspective is coming from ores, iron ore, metal ore. Of course, coming from metal fabricators and coming from smelters, coming from ores, and eventually it originated from the mining field. Not minefields, mining area where metals are being mined, resources are being mined, and therefore the amount of reserved natural resources gets less and less and less environmental impact wise. Forest is resource depletion. And those mining work is using a lot of dynamites, and they got to blast certain portions of the hill, and also some encasement is being involved, and they are just destroying the geological structure, and the environmental impact is geological damage. Simple as that. Okay. And what about the palm oil fruit fibers? This is my love. The palm oil fruit fibers come from the palm fruits, which is an agricultural produce, and it is an input aspect into here. So it is an input aspect into this particular process, boiler furnace. The process is not boiler furnace. Okay, the process is what? Steam generation, but it has been a household name, boiler furnace. The activity is steam generation. The boiler furnace is heat generation. The boiler is steam generation. But it has been a household sort of terminology. Everybody would say it's a boiler furnace, but I hope you understand this activity is steam generation. The equipment is a boiler furnace, and the entire boiler furnace, for this discussion's sake, is an environmental aspect. You should know by now. Now, so let's get to palm oil fruit fibers again. It is an input aspect. So how does it interact with the environment? Remember, environmental aspects interact or can interact with the environment. And palm oil fruit fibers is incoming from palm oil fruits. It is coming from the farm, the agricultural plantation of palm oil. I mean, palm trees. Okay, and that is replantable after 12 years, perhaps 15 years. It is replantable, so it is renewable resource. Environmental impact is renewable resource. Okay, and of course, for that material, it is a renewable resource, so the environmental impact is also resource conservation. But there's another thing that I didn't write down here. Space problem. Agriculture has got an environmental interaction that causes environmental impact. What? One of them. Let me just tell you. Excess fertilizer. What happened to it? Excess fertilizer, and perhaps you want to talk about what? Pesticides, herbicides, rain, surface runoff. Where does it go? River. Think. What happened to the rest of the equation? Okay, so that's about it for the environmental management, environmental aspect. Now let's take a look at risk. All right, and as you remember, we have got to consider, we've got to pay attention, we've got to identify what are the risks associated to this particular operation, which is steam generation. Now, it has legal liability, of course, because the after combustion has got to be emitted out through a stack, and that stack has got to comply to certain specification or legal binding, and the emission from the stack has got to conform to the legal standards as well. So there's legal liability over there. And on top of that, the wet fibers is a risk. Remember, I was mentioning about some minute explosion from the wet fibers itself. That is a risk that have got to be attended. And I would also take a look into the boiler water feed. It is a risk. What risk? Economic risk. What sort of risk to the environment? It is affecting the lifespan of boiler tubes. Another risk, environmental risk, because it is an environmental aspect, and also it is affecting the operations economics. Okay, I hope that is comprehensible. Okay, let's take a look at what opportunity have we as far as this particular equipment and operation is concerned. As I said, if we want to have a prolonged um, lifespan of the boiler tubes, try to find ways to remove the minerals that cause scaling. And I'm learning. Actually, I learned from the coal-fired power generation plant, and that's what they did. Okay, and also perhaps we have to improve some fiber drying. There is always a way, and now some of the factories are doing it, but there are various method of doing it, and probably also one opportunity for the economics and sustainability of this industry. And on top of that, the boiler ash, I believe some mills are converting it into some products, which is good. I suppose there's potassium. Please check. All right, and that would be a plus point for this industry. I look forward for that. I believe some of the industries are doing it. Of course, we can talk about the effluent from palm oil milk, generating methane gas, etc. This is all done, but at this particular point, we are concentrating on only the boiler furnace, and these are items related to the operation of boiler furnace. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, YouTube. As a Muslim Malay in Malaysia is in bahasa, I wish all of you semoga dikurniakan kesenangan, keselamatan, kesejahteraan, kebahagiaan dan kejayaan kehidupan di dunia dan di akhirat. You can get someone to translate that. It is full of love, and I wish everybody, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever faith have you, this wish. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Until we meet in the next video, inshallah. Thank you.